You're about to listen to the Complete Developer Podcast by coders and for coders about all aspects of life as a developer. With your host, the grumpy, old, commercially experienced developer, my dad, Will, and his best friend, the optimistic indie developer, Steve.
Welcome to another episode of Complete Developer Podcast. Before we get started, Will, what have you been fighting this week?
I feel like I've been fighting everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, like some of the stuff I've dealt with at work has been pretty tough. And there's some stuff going on, family-wise that's been problematic, from a couple different places. And then 10 days ago, my dog bit the neighbor's kid in the face. Yeah, and so we just got her back from the rabies quarantine today. And, the dog wasn't rabid, but, it's metro rules. So all that stuff's going on. And then you get to the point where you're irritated all the time, and you screws up your sleep and everything else. What
I don't get is Shady's such a sweet dog.
Yeah, they'd walked her, and she was sore. And the neighbor's kid came up and hugged her and hadn't really been around bigger dogs and didn't know how to read the body language. And she was kind of cornered.
Yeah.
That happens. The kid's okay. He's had a Band-Aid on, but it's kind of scary, a bite to the face is pretty serious. So all that's going on, and then I get on Facebook and I see, I think it's a testament to my level of irritation how I react to Facebook. Like it's a really good gauge, because most of the time I get on there and I'm like, well, this is a complete waste of time. I'm not going to do anything. But I've seen some flat out stupid posts.
Yeah.
I saw one today, and you were in here when we were getting ready, and it was cheese activates the same parts of your brain as hard drugs do.
Yeah, probably.
So somebody's
the release of dopamine.
Yeah, somebody's going to take a razor blade and do a hard line of Munster. People go, "Oh, it's really bad because drugs are bad." Okay, it's like, that's stupid. It activates the same parts of your brain. Okay, well, what happens to your visual cortex if, I don't know, let's say you're doing Molly, or MDMA or one of those kind of things? What happens to your visual cortex? Something.
Yeah.
So therefore, it stimulates the same part of your brain to open your eyes as it does to do hard drugs. And I just sit there and I'm itching going, do you people even science? Have you ever scienced? Because you certainly don't grammar. So, a little frustrated. It's like that random frustration of dealing with a whole bunch of crap that you can't do anything about, but you have to subject yourself to it. And that's where I've been sitting for about 2 weeks. Okay. So, And, Facebook is just irritating me. And, of course, I closed the window. That's why I'm not on there anymore. For the most part. You pretty much never see me. Yeah, so what about you?
I've got a few phone interviews this week. Places here in Nashville, so I'm kind of excited about that, getting myself prepped.
Any of the 47 people that have called me for a reference? 2 of them, yeah. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get the between that and the recruiter calls, man. It's hardcore. Because a lot of companies, I guess, around here are hiring, and they're hiring senior devs, and they want basically all the stuff I've done.
Yeah.
And all the stuff that the other guy in the office, he who shall not be named, has done. And they just, they'll hammer his phone for a little bit, or they'll hammer mine, and then they hammer the other guy. And it's within a day or two. And you just go, okay, somebody big is hiring. It's not even something you think about. Well, that plus the other calls. It's like, wow. I'm sitting there going, man, I'm glad my phone actually has a good battery. Because the phone I used to have, it would be dead by noon. But yeah, I'm glad to see that you're doing some interviews. Hopefully we can get you something.
Yeah, kind of started working on a new project. Basically, creating a mobile-friendly site to pull our podcasting statistics, because the CDN we use for hosting it, they do all the statistics for us, but their website is not extremely mobile friendly, and it's kind of difficult to get to the stats.
Yeah, you ought to build that and then just like show it to them.
That's the plan.
Yeah, because that would be good just in general, and you can show people that you do mobile, and that will put you in a completely different spot than you're in right now.
Well, I think I mentioned before, a lot of the interviews I've had have been asking me about Angular. Yeah, it's something that I put on my resume because I've been learning it, and it's something I enjoy and want to learn more. So I'm using Angular on the front end for this. You were the one that told me to hold off on learning jQuery till I got a good grasp on vanilla JavaScript, and I'm very glad you told me that, because I wrote a few apps in just pure JavaScript before starting to play around with jQuery, and now that I've done that and I'm using jQuery and Bootstrap and Angular, I have a much better understanding of what it's doing, and why it's helping so much, and how to use it. Really, like I took.
Well, if it doesn't do something you want it to do, you've got a fallback plan too.
Yeah, exactly.
Or you can. Well, I would say you can look at the code. You can if you don't look at the minified JavaScript. I would suggest not looking at minified JavaScript if there's any way you can avoid it, but you can figure out what's going on at least.
They've got the JavaScript formatters that.
Yeah, I mean, just having useful variable names is quite nice. Let's just say that I've had a little bit of experience with minified and obfuscated JavaScript of late.
What was it you said?
It's all open source if you believe enough.
Yeah, all JavaScript is open source if you believe enough.
Yeah.
I love that quote. It's funny how you only hear from the people that like something when you change it. I have heard from people that liked the original IoT's music.
Wow. They're like wrong. I like the new one. I like the new one so much better.
Well, one of the Jasons we know, you know which one it wasn't, because one of them wrote the new song, the new music, but texted me at 12:30 last week.
Right after it came out?
Right after it came out, he downloaded it and listened to it and texted me that he didn't like the new music. He said, I like the old music. Well, he didn't say he didn't like it. He said he
didn't like it as much. I remember you, because I think you forwarded that on to me or something. And I was like, it's the middle of the night. What is this? What's this phone flashing? Because I think I looked at it and I just put the phone face down. I'm like, I'm not even. I got to get up in the morning. I don't.
Because we release at midnight on Thursday, so that people who have auto downloads, it's already downloaded for them when they get up and go to work in the morning. It's just something you don't have to stress about.
Yeah.
And so I've been working on the website a lot lately. Big shout out to Brandy Young at Big Active Audience. She did a spotlight on our show, teardown basically of our website and our Twitter account. And
that was hugely helpful. And I talked to her on Founder Cafe about doing that, but I didn't know it was as far along as it was. And that was great.
Oh, yeah, having an outside perspective. And
our bounce rate has dropped.
Yeah, it has.
Substantially. I got in Google Analytics, and I can't completely pin everything down on it because this sort of stuff, you've got several things moving at once. Our bounce rate is much lower than it was, and so I think that's really making a difference.
Now, I spent 2 or 3 afternoons working on the site, first on the main site, and then pretty much all of yesterday afternoon working on the mobile site. Yeah. And I completely redid our mobile site and really like the way it looks now.
Yeah, and it's quick.
Oh, yeah. I dropped this down to under a second load time.
Yeah, which I really thought you were going to have to cache more heavily and do some other things, and it really went a lot better than I thought it was going to. So yeah, big shout out to her. That was a huge help. So I guess it's time to roll the new music.
Yes, and something we can't really complain about because it's really good. I do enjoy it.
Yeah.
This week for IoTs, I have something that related to IoT, but it's a blog post titled "The Useless Side of the Internet of Things," and it's pretty cool. It's not a very long blog, but it kind of hits some of the highlights of just some of the areas that the Internet of Things has gone, where it's just completely useless, and even gives some fake examples of things that seem more useful than some of what is actually produced so far. It's kind of funny and a really good read. I'd suggested there will be a link in the show notes for you guys to take a look at, and it's at motherboard.vice.com. This week we're going to talk about kind of how to be a coder and have a family.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't do this very well, or at least it's one of those things that takes a little bit of trial and error.
It seems like a lot of people tend to think, at least the ones that I know who do have families, it seems to be almost a binary thing. It's like either I'm in the coder mindset or I'm in the family mindset, and it's not integrated well.
I would express it as a sigmoid curve.
Okay.
And there's very little in the middle, which is unfortunate because the middle is actually where you want to be. So I guess before we get really into it, I do want to make a point here that there's a thing going around. There's a phrase that you've probably heard of before, and it's called work-life balance. Balance tends to imply that there's one side bigger than the other. That it's an even scale, and that's really not. At least people tend to think of it as a balanced scale, not a balancing act.
Gotcha. I'm just thinking of, Anakin was supposed to bring balance to the Force.
Well, he did. There were 2 good Jedis and there were 2 bad Jedis left, and everybody else died.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah. No spoilers, bro. If you haven't get there, we really can't help you. It's part of culture now. Anyway, so back to it. So the whole work-life balance thing. There's several problems with this. If you go onto any number of websites that talk about this sort of stuff, they have a very strange mindset about it that you balance work and life, and that's not really how it works out for most people. And
what do you mean by that?
Okay, well, the first thing is that work and life are not separate. It's not oil and water. It's water and salt.
They blend together.
Yeah, you have moments of your personal life that intrude upon work and vice versa. So it's not quite oil and water. It's not quite it's not quite water and salt.
It seems I could see the water and salt because your life is everything that happens to you, and work is one part of it. So that work would be the salt, and your life would be the water, where work is part of.
Yeah, well, I mean, you think about why you work. Most of us, at least most of us that have families, and I would say it's probably true to some degree for the single guys as well, the single coders. You would not be working at the amount that you're doing if it wasn't for family or the potential of having a family. So that's one place where this whole thing falls down. And the fact is, this thing's mixed. So you're going to have to occasionally work late or deal with work problems off the clock. Servers go down. You have clients. You have somebody paying. That money that comes into your checking account every month. Yeah, it comes through your employer, but it goes through your employer. It doesn't come from your employer. And that's just a fact of how the economic system works. So at some point, you're going to have to deal with work problems when you're not at work, just by virtue of that. The other thing that will happen is personal stuff will happen during the day. Your kid's at school during the day. Your wife has work problems or work drama during the day. Everybody's up during the day. Somebody dies in the family, and you find out about it during the daytime.
Yeah, I think for me personally, the harder thing to deal with is a personal issue that happens during the workday than a work issue that happens off the clock, because I can
get a different job.
Well, I was going to say,
if it really comes out bad, it's a lot easier to switch jobs than to switch families.
well, yeah, I was more going switching mindsets. It's easier for me to switch from a off-time mindset to work-time mindset than to switch from work-time mindset to off-time mindset.
Yeah, and that's a fact of the way your discipline is, because if you were able to switch to a personal time mindset on the clock easily, you do it too much. Which, I mean, this kind of comes into it the other way, too, because it's very easy to switch from the personal time mindset to the work mindset and stay there way too often.
I can see that,
And so that's what this episode is kind of going to get into, because we have a tendency that is reinforced by the way that we make a living.
The other thing, too, is
I
would say as developers, the reason that we can switch to that work mindset so easily is because a lot of us...
That's how we think.
Yeah, it's how we think, and we love what we do to the point that I know you come home from work and code on side projects.
Yep. And if I'm not doing side projects, I'm learning something.
Yeah. And me, I mean, I'm in the process of finding a job in coding, but at my other job, I come home and I spend my evenings on the computer either editing the podcast or writing a blog post or coding. And all of that is about coding.
Yeah. And we kind of are in a unique position because I know a lot of artists that, probably paint and things like that during the day. They probably do go home and they do that stuff at night. But as far as people that have high income careers, that's not real common, where that passion really follows them home.
And it's not very common in the...
Well, for one thing, you just can't. But, I think the core thing here is that when you're trying to figure out this work-life balance thing, which is completely mythical, it's almost like we're looking at the problem from the wrong side. The focus on time spent is probably not the best one.
Oh, it's more about quality than quantity.
Right.
Gotcha.
Because you spend 12 hours a day at work. Well, did you get 4 hours worth of work done? The first thing is the length of your workday is not particularly negotiable. Like, there's expectations around how long you work. Like, even if you get 8 hours worth of work done in 6 hours, if you leave at the 6 hour mark, that gets noticed, and they're not going to notice what you did. They're going to notice when you left.
That kind of that's something that's industry specific, because outside of development and outside of kind of a business world, there are certain areas where it doesn't matter how long you're there, but it matters how much you do. So when you get the work done, you can leave. And I've had jobs in the past that were like that.
And I've had a few development positions that were somewhat like that. In general, it's not particularly negotiable how long you work. Even, it's like, oh, well, you got 8 hours worth of work done in 4 hours. Why don't you get 16 hours worth of work done in 8?
Yeah, I can see that.
Even though we both know that doesn't scale, that ends up being the expectation, because it just shifts the expectation.
It may be you spend 4 hours at the beginning of the day working on something that you get 1 hour of work done, and then the next 4 hours are extremely productive because you got the really, really hard thing out of the way. Yeah.
Or, there's that whole, sometimes you can find your flow early in the day, and you can get, like today, I think after lunch, the first hour and a half after lunch, I got almost as much done as I expected to do by then, but it was only the first hour and a half after lunch that I was actually productive today.
Doing mostly personal and freelance work lately, I have found I work best when I get up around 6:37, have a cup of coffee, walk my dog, and get some sunlight. Kind of get that vitamin D going.
Yeah, that's why I walk for lunch whenever I can.
I get that. That just kind of gives me a boost. I was just today, my dad and I went down and worked on their second house, and about halfway down there, it hit me, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm out in the sunlight. That's kind of giving me like that boost of energy. So I was like, why am I so awake? I haven't had my coffee yet.
Yeah.
And
but I get out and I walk a couple times a day for the same reason. And
we used to do that when we were in college. That's something I really miss about where we lived. Is it was really convenient to do that. But what I'm getting
walked around smoking a pipe like a freaking hipster too. Let's be honest, man. I mean, you had the corncob pipe thing coming out there.
Hey, man, I was a hipster before being a hipster was cool.
That was meta. I like that.
No. What I'm getting at is I get up, I get my coffee, I get my sunlight in the morning, and I work great for 3 or 4 hours, and I eat lunch, and then I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
And if I lay down, remember, I'm working from home, so when I work doesn't matter. I could work at 2 a.m.
and nobody cares.
Yeah, but if I lay down around right after lunchtime for about an hour, I get up and I get really productive when I get up.
Yeah. The other thing, as far as time spent, is your spouse's or your significant other's schedule is similarly not particularly negotiable. My wife is a school teacher. She has a time she's supposed to be there and a time she's supposed to leave, and then there's the time she actually leaves, which is later, because school teachers they kind of fudge a little bit on what the expectation actually is. It ends up being a lot longer day than what is actually on the schedule.
I've heard a lot of people mock school teachers for, you get off at 3, and it's like, no, you don't.
They don't.
Like,
they get off at like 4:30, maybe.
Also, the average developer doesn't have to deal with like a room full of 20, 13-year-olds.
No, they just have to deal with a room full of autistics and a server that's on fire.
About the same.
Yeah. As an aside, I'll tell this joke, and hopefully you'll leave it in. I guess fairly early in my marriage, my wife teaches special ed, and she was talking about. She goes, well, you don't understand what it's like dealing with a large number, or dealing with several people that are on the autism spectrum. Well, actually, I'm a software developer. I deal with them after they leave people like you. Not that you didn't fix them or anything, but yeah, we got our people. So another thing is time spent is not the same thing as focus, and you kind of got into this a minute ago. It's really, and this is something I've learned a lot as I've had a development career and a family, is it's more important to be in the moment that you're actually in. It's a little bit cliche, but don't take your work phone to your kid's soccer game and be working during the game. Be at the game. So you do one thing at a time. You don't try to work while you're doing family stuff because you're going to be crap at both. And you don't try to do family stuff at your desk at the office for the most part. Sometimes you have to fudge a little bit because that's not a real hard and fast rule. But most of the time when you're doing the wrong thing in the wrong place, it doesn't work. And you spend more time than you need to do the thing, and you do it poorly. And that's true on either side. Focus is also a lot more noticeable in the way others view you than time is. People don't, and I know I said earlier, like your employer will notice when you leave and come in early. That's kind of a proxy for your focus because they're like, oh, he's more focused on his life than he is on what he's getting done. But for most people, they're not seeing when you're there and when you leave. They see what the output is. I'll give you an example. Would you rather have a friend that spends an hour a week with you but is totally focused on hanging out? Or would you rather have a friend who could spend a couple days in a row with you but is always messing with their phone?
Well, I'd rather have the first, to be honest.
Yeah, everybody would. Because that's an actual friend versus some dude that's sitting there with you. This is kind of what we're talking about with the whole family thing is it's the focus is what gets remembered.
What is your daughter going to remember?
Yeah, she's going to remember playing Super Nintendo probably.
Yeah.
And
she's going to remember me coming over every Monday night and recording this and goofing off with her until we started recording.
Yeah. And that's just the way that works. So I kind of want to go through a few lessons I've learned. I've kind of gone through the entire relationship cycle as a coder. Like I already had a professional development career when Kathleen and I started dating. and gone through the whole dating relationship, engagement, marriage, honeymoon, childbirth, early childhood, marital difficulties and other things. And I know this is going to sound incredibly blunt when I say it, but your significant other probably does not care about coding.
Unless they're a coder, I would say they don't.
Yeah, full stop. They care about you.
They care about what you do. They just really don't care about the details.
Yeah. Well, and it's like my wife is a special ed teacher, and I come back to this because she always talks about the IEPs and all this stuff that these special ed kids have. Besides the fact that there's a lot of terminology in there that's really hard to get your head around because you're not in that space. There's a fact of I didn't want to do that, so I didn't do that. So
which I think is really fascinating with our friendship and the friendship I have with your wife is I've got the psychology background, so
and you got the young child.
Yeah, I taught preschool, so I speak that language. I speak the coding language. Even back in college, I spoke it because I did it in high school. But you spoke biology and psychology because those are things you were interested in.
Just because your significant other doesn't care about coding doesn't mean they don't care about you. Right?
No, that's a good point.
Those are two very different things. It's very easy to misinterpret either, them caring about you as they care about your day-to-day, like how you optimized a for loop.
On that note, this is a feature, not a bug.
It really is because, honestly, do you want to come home and you want to talk about work the entire time? Because why not just be working the entire... it sort of helps enforce a barrier that is psychologically healthy.
It really does. Good grief, even if your significant other is a coder, and we know a few people who are married to fellow coders.
Yeah, and I can't imagine that they talk about code all the time. I can think of two of them in particular that they're way too fun and way too well adjusted.
That's exactly who I was thinking about. Yeah, I was just like, there is no way, because both of them are...
They do too many other things. There's just no way. And it is actually a feature of the relationship that lets you get away from work. Another thing is like that constant obsession with computers. If you indulge that and you let it eat up all your time, you actually become less of a good programmer. It will damage your career.
I can totally see that.
Because you can't relate to other people and you don't have outside experience. It's like over-focusing on one muscle while weightlifting. If you're the guy that has a bicep that's 27 inches around, but your wrist is normal size, well, if you try to actually lift something, you're going to break your own arm. It's just not... It's a completely unbalanced worldview. Another thing is, quite frankly, a lot of coders whine a lot because, honestly, most code written is crap. Let's just throw that out there. And most of us run into things. I ran into stuff today that was pretty atrocious code. I will not be discussing that with my wife.
Well, you don't really want to appear to be a whiner.
Exactly, because you talk about something that kills attraction, and besides the fact that it just makes other people miserable to have to listen to that.
It's something that makes you miserable. Do you really want to make other people miserable?
Especially people in your house.
Yeah,
I'm completely okay with making other people miserable so long as they don't live with me.
Yes, you are.
But it's one of those things that, when you actually think through the ultimate consequences, this is stupid. Don't do that. Another point, which I raised this earlier, is live in the moment. Don't be working while you're out with the family, actually doing something. It's okay to, if I go to the in-laws and they're all hanging out and they're watching TV, they're doing their thing, I can work. Another thing is don't bring baggage from home to work. It's particularly important, and the converse is also true, right? You don't bring stuff from work home. You keep that barrier, and Okay, so the next thing is be conscientious of your attractiveness. It's going to slip. Age and stress and all these other things are going to eventually take you. But the biggest thing is don't get fat and soft. I did that at one point during the marriage, and my wife kind of called me on it, and
very validly.
Yeah, because I was, if you remember, and of course we started training and we were throwing each other around, and and
I remember when we started training again, we'd both kind of gotten bigger. Well, all three of us, the other friend of ours that did martial arts with us, and you were able to fit into, because I'm kind of a heftier, like my build is different from yours, and you were able to fit into the gi or the uniform that I wore in college.
Yeah. And you were able to fit into his old uniform, and he had to buy another one.
Yes.
If I remember correctly.
That's exactly the way it was.
Yeah, but it's not so much the weight as it is the softness. Mm-hmm. Like, if you're muscled up or you're fit and you're heavier, that doesn't matter as much as if you're flabby. And I was kind of there. So it's very important to be conscientious of your attractiveness, because again, you want to keep your significant other
attracted
around.
To you.
Yeah, I mean that's a baseline that makes a lot of things easier. Another thing is don't get so locked into work that you don't take care of your partner. I've been guilty of that a few times. In the marriage, it's a tricky balance right now with the amount of stuff that I've got that I have to deal with. Part of that is actually being present. That was a thing that I didn't do very well. I was at work 40 to 50 hours a week, and I was thinking about work like 90 hours a week. Now I'm at work 65 to 70 hours a week, but when I'm not at work, like when we watch X-Files, I'm watching X-Files with my wife.
Yeah, but the only time you're not at work and you're thinking about work is when we're talking about it on the podcast.
Yeah. And it's better segmented and it's more focused. I mean, gosh, it works so much better. Like, I'm more productive, even in a 40-hour work week now than I was in a 70-hour work week, because I'm completely present.
You're completely present at both places.
Yeah.
Really. And that kind of leads right into, don't fail to keep good boundaries, because good boundaries is how you do that.
It really does. Like, my employer, the company I'm contracting for that I hope very soon becomes an employer. I mean, I hope to have news probably by the time this podcast airs on that.
I will be honest with you. I would be surprised if
I'd be surprised if they don't too, because it's just a very good.
It's a good fit for you, and I think you're a good fit for them.
Yeah. But the thing is I don't, and I know this sounds kind of bad. If my wife is going through drama, I don't allow that to overtake work time. And if things are going on at work, I don't bring them home. There's a wall there, and things don't cross it. It's like a blood-brain barrier. There's not going to be a whole lot go across that. You go through things, and you kind of want to keep that fire walled off. And we're going to get into this when we talk about resilience. Another thing is take time for yourself. Some of the worst time periods in my marriage have been where I worked all the time. I felt like I was working all the time, and then when I wasn't working, I was either dealing with stuff going on with Kathleen or stuff going on with our daughter. Like, I felt like there was no time for me. That really doesn't work very well. You can do it for a week or two, but after that point, it gets pretty psychologically unhealthy really quick, because you start to feel like, okay, why am I alive? And, you kind of have to unwind stuff. And if you're always around other people, always dealing with other people's stuff, you can't.
And that's true. And that's the benefit of having friends that understand that you're going through stuff, and that can see
drag
that
you kicking and screaming back to sanity.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, let's not put that in any other way other than what it is. Okay, so we've discussed that in the realm of significant others. So now let's talk about children. The first thing is kids do add complexity. Mm-hmm. Like, the underlying relationship is there, but there's a few other pieces that get in there. You'll notice that kids are kind of last on the list, or second to last. I wrote the outline, and then I wrote more of the outline. But
that happens.
There's a reason kids are last on the list. Is because the other is the baseline. And most of the things from the marriage list apply, and they have to be in place and working before anything with kids really happens. Like,
to be successful and maintain success, I can see that, because
you can't fake it for very long.
No. I look at my youngest sister, and she may be listening to this podcast.
She probably is. Hi, Lori.
Hi, Lori. Yeah. My nephew is a honeymoon baby. They had been married just a few months when they found out she was pregnant with my nephew. And they were still in the process of developing the other stuff.
Yeah. And there's never enough time for that, even if you've been married 2 or 3 years, and it feels like an interloper.
Yes.
You know, it's always going to have that.
And the great thing for them, though, is they both wanted kids.
Things get more challenging when you have a kid. I'm going to completely nerd out here. Do you remember from physics what happens when you have two bodies in space that are in a gravitational arrangement?
Yes.
Like you have a barycenter and two things rotate around it.
Okay, yeah. I see where you're going with this.
When you add a third one, what happens to the predictability of the motions of the other two?
Yeah, there isn't any.
That's children.
I see the point you're making here. That makes sense, though.
You can embrace that or not, but it will be there. And, you know, a lot of people are very successful and they embrace it. And so it's effectively a three-body problem, but it's psychological. You know, because babies cry in the middle of the night. You know, small children come downstairs, they've wet the bed, they've had a nightmare. Kids are different than spouses, which is...
Duh.
Yeah, that's a bit obvious because the thing with spouses is they remember their own parents. Kids do not. Kids have parents right now. So, like, whatever you give them is what they remember.
That makes sense.
And that's an extremely heavy responsibility that you need to think about. And, you know, what kind of life do you want to set up for your kid in such a way that it actually enables them versus disables them? If you're dealing with stuff appropriately, that can be an absolutely amazing experience for the child. And it's something that they'll remember for their life and they will be better off for. However, if you screw it up, there's no end to the problems. Here's the last piece of controversial advice, and I did not put it in the outline explicitly. The most important relationship between you and your kids is between you and your spouse. Yeah, I'm kind of leaving a little bit of dead air here because that really doesn't sink in with people. I mean, it's not that you're a bad person if you get divorced or something like that. What really makes kids dysfunctional when they grow up, a lot of that comes from the interaction of their parents.
That makes perfect sense.
You know, my daughter is learning what a man is supposed to be by the way I act, whether I want that to happen or not. That's the way that flows. You learn how a woman is supposed to act by your mother. Even if other experiences maybe change some of that, the base is there. Do you remember the movie Gladiator? Like, it's at the beginning where they're about to charge into the line of Germanics, and Maximus is talking to the soldiers. And he said, you know, what we do in life echoes in eternity. That's children.
That makes perfect sense. That really does. I mean,
you do something screwed up and your children see it, you are throwing a bomb into the future. Like, that doesn't mean you should be freaked out by it and like psychologically tensed up about it, but you need to be aware that there's downstream consequences.
I mean, I can see that even with my nieces and my nephew. I'll be honest, my nieces and nephew think the world of me.
All nieces and nephews do.
Yeah, I'm the uncle that lets them come over and play video games, and you know they can hold the controller and drop it if they want, and I'm not mad at them.
Yeah.
Everybody's got their own controller when they come to my place, and it just because honestly, I remember being 5 years old and wanting to do the things the older kids did, but not getting to, and so I let them. I mean, good grief!
I remember my uncle let me slop the hogs. Which is totally a McMinnville, Tennessee thing, I guess. I get to feed the hogs, and
well, I mean,
it actually turns out he and my grandfather really just didn't want to carry that bucket over there. But it was great for me.
You felt like you were awesome.
Yeah, I felt like I'm actually helping out, and it was just
and you were helping out.
I was.
That's the thing.
They didn't want to do anything.
They didn't want to do it, and you were helping.
It was totally valid.
Yeah, but what I'm getting at is one of the things that my sister told me my nieces were really looking forward to this past Christmas was coming up and playing video games and spending time with me.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to say we got in trouble, but their favorite thing, like every time I was at my parents' house, they asked, hey, can we go over to Uncle BJ's and play video games?
Given all that, like, I didn't want to put that in the outline because not couching it. Like, if you don't take care of your relationship with your significant other, your kids will suffer. Kathleen and I both have this thing. We put each other first before our daughter, and that's a way of putting our daughter in a better situation, because it's very easy when you have a child to put the child first. Children are basically, they're a blessing and all that, but they're also a bottomless pit of wants and needs. And if you don't take care of your spouse and you take care of your kid first, the spouse will never get taken care of.
And I would say this applies even more if you are divorced.
I would agree with that,
because
from what I've seen of friends that have gone through that,
having seen it almost firsthand from my ex-wife, like, seeing what divorce was like when the parents did not get along, even when the kids were adults and the parents still didn't get along.
Especially, I have that in my family.
Yeah.
And it's still an issue. And it happened before I was born, and I'm 36 years old now. It is still causing a schism today. Like, that wound will not close until everybody that remembers it is dead.
And then I see my ex-wife's stepmom and her ex-husband getting along great. Like, he came to every Christmas, every event that they had. Like, good grief, I remember when we went to their wedding anniversary party for her dad and her stepmom. Her stepmom's ex-husband came with his girlfriend, who is now his wife.
Yeah, and is friends with the ex.
Yeah,
and I know a couple like that, and, I know they had some rough times, and actually the wives, the wife and the ex-wife, almost tried not to like each other, and then they're great friends now. It just, they tried not to work it out, and they did, because they were like, you're awesome. The last piece I've got here is how to handle survival mode, and I guess I want to preface this by saying that there's always going to be a time when something major happens that overwhelms everything else. My wife and I have had that. My parents had that. My grandparents had that. And it goes back to probably when we crawled down out of the trees and started throwing rocks at large predators. It's important to have that in your head that that's going to happen, because when it sneaks up on you, it's a whole lot worse than when you're going, okay, am I seeing this coming? It's sort of like we were talking about the conflict resolution stuff that it's going to be in a future episode. It's one of those things that it's easier to deal with if you see it coming, and if you know that it is eventually coming. It's always in the room. Get your mental state to optimal before you do anything else. Like, don't do anything rash. When you're in crisis mode, figure out how to get from point A to point B and then deal with things. Don't deal with things when you're stressed out.
That's conflict resolution 101, really. It
is, but it's awful hard to remember in the moment. Coming out of a martial arts background, you can remember, I do this wrist lock this way, and I push here, and I twist this, and I do that, and the guy falls. Yes. When somebody's throwing a punch at your head, that plan doesn't work. It's Mike Tyson said, and this is one of my favorite quotes. Mike, if you're out there, man, for some crazy reason you're listening to a development podcast, I want your signature on something that says everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face.
I love that quote. I want that too.
I want that in a frame on every project management wall in the country.
That would make a great motivational poster.
It is, because that's life. And it's that way with your marriage. Everybody has a plan until something hits them in the face. So get your mental state to optimal. Like, don't over emotionalize your reaction. To some degree you can't. Another thing to remember is that your spouse, and especially your kids, even if you and your spouse break up, your kids are still in your life. And they're gonna be even after a job is gone. Because most people don't work 40 years. And even if you work 40 years, your kids are still your kids after 40 years.
Even after a divorce, if you have kids, your spouse is still in your life.
Yeah, they really are.
I mean, at least, at bare minimum, until your kids are 18.
Even then.
Even after that.
There is no release but death.
From what I've seen.
You need to understand the marital vow in a different light. Till death do us part doesn't mean that you're living apart. It means that you're bound forever.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I'm glad that my ex-wife and I did not have kids is we're both able to move on with our lives.
To some degree, yeah. I mean, that's always going to be in the background, right?
Well, yeah, but we don't have that.
You don't have a financial responsibility and a social and psychological and other things responsibility. But
we can move on with our lives.
They're still there. Like, I mean, if you ran into her, you would not be emotionally neutral, and neither would she.
Well, no. I mean, that would be ridiculous to consider we would be.
You carry the other forever. If you disown your parents, or vice versa, they disown your actions. They don't really disown you because you're still their child. Like, that bond doesn't break. And that's an important thing to remember, because it's better to heal that bond and to make that bond work than to try and act like there is no bond in all those cases. And it's even better, like in a divorced couple, to go, okay, they have their life, I have my life. We're still friends. We don't hate each other.
On that line, I would say not to make major decisions about non-survival things when you're in survival mode.
Yeah. I mean, if you're on the Titanic and it's sinking, this sounds really trite. Don't think about like what color your drapes are at home. Get on the lifeboat.
Yeah.
Then get home. And if you still hate them, then change the color of the drapes. Don't freeze to death in the North Atlantic.
Yes.
Figuring that out. Yeah, so it's a prioritization thing, and it's a how to be a functional human being thing.
And if you're Leonardo DiCaprio,
dude,
you can fit on that door frame.
Yeah, yeah. Man, I hated that part of that movie. It's like, really?
Everybody did.
But the thing is, he died because it was effective as a story point.
Yes, it was.
However, what's effective as a story point is not effective as a functional way to live your life. In fact, like, if you're living something that seems like something out of a George R.R. Martin novel, maybe that's time for an adjustment. If you look at Game of Thrones and you go, hey, that's just like my life, maybe that's the time to kind of, maybe refactor some things.
You know what? I would even say, like, let's go to the extreme here. If you're living your life like a Lifetime movie, something's wrong, because that's not reality.
Reality is not a sequence of dramatic actions. Reality is a sequence of paying the bills, flushing the toilet, and taking out the garbage.
Exactly. And on that note, I think that kind of wraps up everything we have to say. So before we close out the episode, Will, what do you have for us this week for Tricks of the Trade?
I kind of want to reiterate something that we talked about before. How we discussed there's a lot of developers that are starting to learn how to code, and how you and I both can kind of start to pick out the people that are going to be successful and the ones that aren't. And the biggest thing with all of them that we're pretty sure are going to do okay is that they're trying to be an expert at one thing, and versus the other people that are like, oh, I'm going to learn like 8 different languages and I can write hello world and everything. And
as a junior developer learning my way into the community, I can completely understand that mentality, because you want to be that polyglot, because you see people that are. What you don't realize, I guess, is
the amount of time it takes to actually get up to a point where you're actually effective. Okay, like, think about computer languages in the terms that you would think about human languages. You can get proficient in Spanish enough to order and talk to people in a year. Good, solid, steady practice.
Yeah.
You cannot, unless you've got some kind of weird mental thing going on, unless you're 4 or 5 standard deviations out, you can't go, okay, well, in a year I'm going to get fluent in Spanish, French, Russian, Icelandic, and Japanese. Okay, go. You're not going to be able to talk to anybody in any of those languages effectively.
Like, even if you stuck within, like, the 5 Romanic languages.
Yeah.
Like they are very, very similar, but you would still.
And this is why you can learn JavaScript and C# at the same time, or JavaScript and Java, or C and JavaScript, or you should learn JavaScript. I will throw that out there because it's getting so common. It's crazy not to. But you can kind of get a little bit of multiple C-based languages at the same time. But when they don't have a common ancestor back there, you're going to have a bad time if you don't specialize. Let's all bear in mind here that the reason we have civilization is because we have specialization. Because otherwise, we would all be polyglots, right? We could make our own flint tools. We could hunt our own animals. We could skin our own animals. We could, make our own bone needles and sew stuff up. And we'd freeze to death in a cave and die at the age of 35.
Oh, you're talking about I can do all of that.
Right.
It's called Minecraft.
Yeah. But so bear this in mind. The same constraints apply. Just to kind of be cognizant of that and just try and get significant depth in one thing before you start trying to get more depth in other things. You can always become a polyglot. I can program reasonably well in JavaScript. I'm actually very, very comfortable doing very stupid things in JavaScript, like ridiculous stuff that's hard. And I'm very comfortable in C#. I'm very comfortable in SQL. I'm okay in Ruby and Python, but that came over time. That's well over a decade. And so I just want to kind of reiterate the point that specialization will help you. Specialization is how you get more money, and generalization is how you get more stability.
So a good balance?
Eventually, yes.
Eventually, but
right, because the first thing you're probably trying to do early in your career is get your income up. Because you got student loans to repay, you want to move out of your parents' place, etc. Once you're stable enough, once you've got enough income that you're comfortable, then you learn more things so that you can apply your skills in more areas. So it's more of a strategic decision. If you have a question or comment for us, please email us at neckbeards@completedeveloperpodcast.com. Our theme music is an excerpt from Stand By for Titanfall by Pure Bells, available on SoundCloud and licensed under Creative Commons. The intro music for IoTs is Hillbilly Hip Hop by Jason Belcher. For references, show notes, and to sign up to our email list, be sure and check out the website at www.completedeveloperpodcast.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at CompleteDevPod, and like our page on Facebook to keep up with news about the show. Thanks for listening. See you next time.